there is this idea that they're holding out hope because we've seen so many twists and turns these past, number of years that, they want someone there who can beat Joe Biden and, in head-to-head matchups. Nikki Haley beats Joe Biden decisively.
This weekend, the former US President Donald Trump has won 3 more states in the Republican primaries, putting him ever closer to being the party's candidate for the Oval Office. And this week, we've got arguably the most important day in the run-up to this year's election. In Super Tuesday, Democrat and Republican constituents in 15 states will be voting for who they want to represent their parties in November's battle for the White House. And while Donald Trump is cruising ahead, the incumbent Joe Biden actually faced a huge number of uncommitted voters in a primary recently. There's a very specific reason for that. Let's hear, though, first from the former president. Speaking at a rally in Virginia earlier, Donald Trump was looking ahead to Tuesday.
We want to send a big signal, so it's important. I mean, we don't need your vote. We want you to get out, though, and vote in big margins. And we want to send that little freight train going along because it's going to be the big day, the biggest day in the history of our country is November 5th. That's the biggest day because our country is being destroyed by an incompetent president, a corrupt president, the worst president we've ever had.
Nikki Haley was speaking at a rally in North Carolina.
We need a new generational leader that can put in 8 years, day and night, fixing the things we need fixed with no negativity, no drama, no vendettas, just real results for the American people.
Nikki Haley, okay, let's get into it. Julia Manchester is national politics reporter at The Hill. Julia, hi, evening.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Just take us into what happened overnight, as it was for the United Kingdom, in those Republican primaries.
So in those Republican primaries, we actually had a number of caucuses in states like Idaho, where you essentially had, Donald Trump continuing to sweep those victories. And I think that, sweep those states, that wasn't unexpected at all. I think what most Americans are watching is Super Tuesday, and that's where you have the most delegates up for grab during a given primary night this election cycle and really any election cycle. So if Donald Trump were to win the majority of delegates on Super Tuesday, he could theoretically, amass half the delegates up for grabs in the total election, and that would essentially put him on track to become the presumptive nominee. He right now is seen as the presumptive nominee, but right now he has 854 delegates are up for grabs. Once he meets that magic 1215 number, 1,215 delegates, he will, be seen as that presumptive nominee.
Right. Is there any jeopardy, any path for Nikki Haley to upset him on Super Tuesday?
Theoretically, yes. I mean, anything can happen in elections, particularly in North Carolina and in Virginia, which is right across the river from where I am in Washington, D.C. Nikki Haley could perform better in those states than, say, maybe conservative states like Texas, for example, in, the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area, the suburbs there, in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington. She could perform, well. However, I was at an event for Nikki Haley on Thursday night talking to her supporters, and I essentially asked, do you think she's going to win Virginia? Do you think she's going to win these primaries? And they said, no, but we see her as an alternative to Trump in case something were to happen to him, whether it's health related or, in terms of his legal issues, for whatever reason he couldn't run. And there's also a lot of never Trump Republicans supporting Nikki Haley right now.
Well, that's interesting. So hang on, people who are sort of minded to support Donald Trump but concerned that his candidacy may be affected by outside factors, his health or his, whatever, court cases, etc., they are willing to bet on Nikki Haley as well.
They are, but they don't, just in the case that something were to happen between now and the Republican National Convention. I mean, you hear a lot about this term sometimes in these hypothetical, if it were ever to come down to a floor fight on the convention floor at the Republican National Convention later this summer, that Nikki Haley could, get enough delegates there and, win that way. That's very unlikely. At that point, however, there is this idea that they're holding out hope because we've seen so many twists and turns these past, number of years that, they want someone there who can beat Joe Biden and, in head-to-head matchups, Nikki Haley beats Joe Biden decisively.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Speaking of Joe Biden, Julia, he is actually going through a primary process himself for the Democrats. As an incumbent, though, and as an incumbent who's decided he wants to stand, clearly, he is sort of effectively unchallenged. There was, however, a really interesting story about people writing uncommitted, or a high turnout of people sort of effectively going to those primaries and not backing Joe Biden. What happened there and why?
Yeah, so this is one of the rare instances where you see foreign policy, really impacting a domestic election here in the United States. In Michigan, you have a very large, consequential Arab American and Muslim American population, particularly in the greater Detroit area. Now, lots of Muslim Americans live in the United States. However, they're concentrated in this one area in Michigan, and Michigan is a swing state. We've seen that President Biden won it by a point or less than a point in 2020. Before that, Donald Trump very narrowly won it. So these voters, if they don't come out for the Democrat, because we see that Muslim and Arab American voters tend to vote Democratic rather than Republican, if they stay home, that's going to hurt the Democratic nominee. So they're unhappy with President Biden's handling of the Israel Hamas war. And this is their way of showing their discontent with it, threatening to sit this one out to make him look weak in the primary. Now, he got turnout was so high in Michigan across the board. However, that uncommitted number got 13% support. That's not nothing. So I think between now and on election day, you're probably going to see the Biden administration really try to work to win these votes. And I think part of that work started tonight, or, tonight, Kamala Harris's comments played into that by calling for a ceasefire.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. I'm also reminded via your Twitter, Julia, that 4 years ago today, I think you were in, where were you? Is it Virginia you were in?
Virginia,
Yeah.
yes.
And that was, as you say, it was 12 days before COVID lockdown.
Yes.
Biden had just won South Carolina. It was about to sweep Super Tuesday. The sort of shoe was on the other foot, wasn't it? Trump was the incumbent. Biden was picking up
Yes.
momentum in a primary race that he sort of had a slow start in, didn't he? And the world was about to change enormously. I can't quite decide, Julia, if everything feels enormously different from then, or actually if it just feels the same.
It's hard to tell. I think, it feels the same, and a lot of Americans are upset with this, that the fact we're seeing this Trump versus Biden matchup again. But I think it's so different in that the world has changed so much since then. Politics have changed. So much since then. I mean, a lot of the people in that picture with Biden, I know that a UK audience might not be paying as close attention to that, but you have the former Virginia governor. He tried to run again for governor, didn't win. There's another Democratic member of Congress in that picture. She's no longer in Congress. So we've just seen the face of politics change since then.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way of pulling that thread, isn't it? The world has changed. So many of the characters around them have changed, but those two men at the center of political gravity in America haven't. And that's, I think, a really interesting thing for us to consider. Julia, thank you. We'll speak again lots in the next few weeks. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Julia Manchester from The Hill, national politics reporter at The Hill, with us on Times Radio tonight. Carol Walker, by the way, will be live from the US this time tomorrow. We'll have all the build-up to Super Tuesday. She'll be there on Tuesday night as well as those primaries, those that really potentially very decisive primary, actually, the moment that I think we get the clarity that we all sort of assumed we've had up to now on who will be on that ticket come November the 5th. And next week as well, by the way, can I just point you in the direction of a Times and Sunday Times special event, because we're going to be bringing together a group of leading correspondents to help answer your questions on US politics. If you're sat there right now and thinking, oh, but hang on a minute, Julia, what about X, Y, Z? Or what happens to this person? Or how does that work? Or what happens if ... We will answer some of those questions for you in a virtual event on Wednesday. You don't have to be a subscriber, by the way, to do this. So it's really worth doing. I've registered. I'm going to be there via my laptop, 7 till 8 on Wednesday night. And you can sign up at times-event.com/US-election. Okay? That's quite a bit to take in, isn't it? I know. Let's just go slow. times-event.com/US-election.